Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, starting with Hilchos Kalayim, Prakim Tes and Yud, concluding Hilchos Kalayim, and starting Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, Perek Echad. So let's go to the 9th chapter of the laws of Kalayim, and this will all be about the prohibition of mating 2 different species of animals together, as well as working with 2 different animals together. This Perek has 11 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Says that Rambam, Hamarkiv Zachac al Nekeva she'enam inoy, if a person causes a relation, a physical relation, between 2 different species of animals, right, the male of one species with the female of another species, bein bebehema, bein bechaya, u beoifes, and even with mini chaya shebayam, the din is, no matter where a person made that happen, the person is violating a biblical commandment for which there's chiyuv malchus. B'chol makom means whether you are in the Holy Land, whether it's outside the Holy Land. And this is Shenemar and Parshas Kedoshim, that behemtecha, your animals, and it includes all types of living creatures. Loi, tarbiyah, kalayim, you shall not mate with another species. The echad behema chayiv oif shaloi doesn't make a difference whether it belongs to you or whether it belongs to someone else. However, when a chayiv malchus ve'ena loike, achiyachnis biyadoi kemechachol b'shifay feres, only if you actually insert the organ, that's when you chayiv malchus. Avolam helam zal zebelvad. But if a person just merely places one animal on top of the other without physically inserting the organ, or if he doesn't even place one animal on top of the other, he encourages one talking to them, so then he's not going to be chayiv malchus. He's causing, but he gets rabbinic malchus. Now, halacha beis, muter lahachnish shnei minim l'sad echad. A person is allowed to place 2 species, a male of one, a female of the other, in a one corral. That's already not a problem. That's already not called putting one on top of the other. It's not even called indirect. It's not on him. And if he sees them, Ravu says that if he sees them mating with the other, he's not obligated to separate them. And final, so one might think, well, if so indirect is okay, I want for my animals to mate for whatever reason, different species, I'll give it to a goy. I'll ask a goy to do it. That's already not allowed. Okay. Now, this is amazing. Halacha 3. Even if a person violated the biblical commandment, which means that he physically mated one with the other, inserting the organ, what happens if there's an offspring? He's allowed to derive benefit from the offspring. We're speaking about a species that are not kosher. If they're kosher, not only can he derive benefit, he can eat them. See, that's what's interesting. And if it was 2 kosher species, even though he did it direct, he's going to get malchus. He's allowed to eat it, as we learn in the laws of Machalas Asuras. So I give it just in contrast. When it comes to this, to the mixing of meat and milk, if you cook them together, not only can you not eat it, you can derive benefit from it. When you put shatnez together, which will be the next chapter, you can't have any benefit from it. I can't wear the garment, even if I didn't make it. I can't put it on me. Here, you can eat it. You can have benefit from it. There's different levels of the prohibition of mixing different things. Some of them may not be done, and if they're done, it's like horrible. And some of them, once they were done, it's okay. Think about it. How many fruits do we have right now that is like tangerines, 2 different species? They were not allowed to be made. Once they're made, we can eat them. Halacha Dalet. Shnei mina behema oy chaya shedoimim zelozeh. Now, when you have 2 different species of either domesticated animals, not domesticated animals, that they resemble each other, but they're different species, even though they can impregnate one the other, since they are 2 different species, he's going to give many examples, they are kalayim. And again, if it happened already and they have an offspring, then it's okay. But you're not allowed to be markiv them. You cannot make them together. And what would be examples of two animals that are two different species, but they resemble each other, they look like each other, etc.? Ze'evim kelev, a wolf and a dog. Many wolves and dogs, mamash, look very similar. Hakelef hakufri, a hunting dog, imshul with a fox. Giving just examples that he gives. Hatzavoim inoizim, certain deers and goats. Haye'elim, that's mountain goats, imrechelim and sheep. Hasusim aperet, horses and mules. Aperet emachamor, mules and donkeys. Chamor im ha'oroi, donkeys and wild asses. Afa pisha demem zelozeh, areim kalayim zelozeh. Now, halacha 5. Min sheyesh boy, if you have one species, but it has midbari, it has a wild species of it, and it has a yishuv, a domesticated species. He gives an example of shor habar, a wild ox with an ox. Or a ramach imasus, a wild horse and a horse. That's already okay. Mutar lahakivim zemzeh, because they belong to the same species. The only exception for that are ducks. Avos, I don't know. That avos im avos bar, a duck and a wild dog, they are considered klaim zebozeh. Oh, and why is that? Because sheho avos, because the domesticated duck, dates of mibafnim, its testicles are inside its body. There's a biological difference. And the avos, a wild dog, avos habar, baits of mibachutz. That means they're two different species. Now, hakoi, I know that some other Rishonim translate koi or kvi as a certain type of animal that's not a hybrid. It's an animal that halachically we don't know whether it's an animal or whether it's a domesticated animal or a non-domesticated animal. That Rambam already paskin many times that the koi or the kvi is a hybrid of a deer and a goat. Now, a deer is a non-domesticated animal, it's chaya, and a goat is the domesticated animal. So kalayim, they remain, so it's like a new thing. You already have a hybrid. That may not be mated, not with a pure chaya, nor with a pure behemoth. But if you did that, you're not going to get malchus because there's a doubt regarding it. Another case, hayeloidim and akalayim, offsprings from mixed species. Who can they marry? Who can they mate with? Goes by the mother. Guys, this is fascinating. What do we mean by the mother? That Rambam is going to say, if their mothers are from the same species, then you're allowed to mate one with the other. If their mothers are from different species, you're not allowed to mate them one with the other. He's going to give example. And if you did so, you chayiv malchus. And more than that, this offspring of a mixed species cannot mate with the mother species directly. It can only mate with an offspring from a mixed species that shares the same mother. We'll give examples. You'll get malchus. It's also midoy raisa. Lomashal. Keithan. Peret she'imoy chamor. A donkey. Peret. A fered. And Yiddish, a fered is a horse, but a peret is a donkey, whose mother is a. I'm sorry. Peret is a mule. Slicha. A mule. A mule whose mother is whose mother is a donkey. Mother is a chamoy. Can be mated with a female mule whose mother is a donkey. Okay. But this mule cannot be mated with a female donkey. In other words, the male mule is a mixture. It's a hybrid. The chamoir is not a mixture. But with which other type of mixed hybrid could it mate with one that shares same mother? It doesn't matter if it has the same father or not. But let's go. A pered, a male mule whose mother is a horse, a male mule whose mother is a horse, cannot be mated with a female mule whose mother is a donkey. They have to share the same mama, same mother type. Guys, this is so meaningful. In other words, for my animal connect to your animal, we must share the same type of mother animal. Whatever that means, psychologically. The father animal won't help us connect. The animal. Now, guys, we're not animals, but there's an animal in all of us. Okay, weiter. Someone should write a book on all this. This is the part of the Torah that was not developed, or not developed enough. Just applying it all. to the animal soul, to the godly soul, to figure all that out. If you want to mate a male mule with a female mule, or as we'll learn in the second section of this chapter, the other issue of animal kilayim isn't mating them together, but it's making both of them work together. As we'll give examples, like two different animals are pulling the same wagon. Asun midoy raisa, as we'll see. We'll see the details soon. So if a person wants to push a wagon with a pered and a pirda, with a male mule and a female mule, for you to know that they are the same, they have to have the same mother. How would you know that? How would you know? The answer is, you look at the ears, at the tail, and the sound it makes. Guys, if you can see Aaron's face, it would be amazing. That's how we know mother. The ears, the tail, and the sound. If they resemble one the other, be a dua. She'iman mimin echad umutarim. Oh, that's what I was saying. Let's do it with our animal soul. Yeah, it relates so much. You have to just, I can touch it. Okay, halacha zay. Kol ha'oisa malacha. Now, like this is the second topic of the chapter. So we spoke about the mating. Now we're going to speak about working. Kol ha'oisa malacha b'shnei mina behemai chaya ka'echad. If you mix two different types, now here it's different. In the first part of this chapter, you know, the Rambam spoke out, if you remember in Hilchos Shchita, that you have 3 types of domesticated animals, you have 7 types of chayas. The Rambam spoke about that. I know each one has many subspecies, but there are types here. The issue, Yaron, is not 2 types. It's 2 types in which one is kosher to be consumed and one is not kosher. That's the key. In the prohibition of working with 2 animals together, they don't always have to be from the same species. The isur is only if one is tahar and one is tamei. The example the Torah gives is shoy v'chamor. Shoy, it can be eaten, chamor cannot be eaten. In other words, to a lamb and a goat, you can harness a carriage to both of them. That's okay. But you cannot mate them with each other. Again, anywhere, even in Ba'aretz, B'chutz La'aretz, Shenemer, as it says, Parshas Ki Seitzei, Loi Sacharosh, don't plow with an ox and a donkey yachtov. Why are you laughing? No, I didn't say that, and no one heard that. Now, Echad, now the Torah gives an example of plowing, says that it's not just about plowing, it's just an example. Whether it's plowing, whether it's seeding, whether it's moishech b'hamagolam, whether they're schlepping a wagon, whether they're schlepping something heavy, a stone. And even if you had them do work, not even because you manipulated, because you grabbed onto their reins, you led them with your voice. You're chayiv malchus. No matter how you cause them to work together. But if you only place the yoke on them, that's called mizavgan. You place the yoke on them together. It means when they will walk, they'll be schlepping something together. You're not going to get malchus. When are you going to get malchus? When you start to pull them or to lead them. Another thing, when the Torah says shoyr v'chamoid, it doesn't only mean shoyr v'chamoid. Halacha ches ve'echad shoyr v'chamoid. But what's unique about shoyr v'chamoid is that one is a kosher type, one is a non-kosher type. The echad kol shnei minim. If one is tamei and one is tahar, whether they are both behemoths, whether they are both chayas, it's even a behemoth, a behemoth. He gives an example: a chazer, a pig, it's in the category of a domesticated creature, and a keves and a lamb. No, why? Not be. In other words, the fact behema be doesn't make it okay. Kosher, not kosher. Or chayim chayim. Chayim will be a yachmor, a wild deer, which is in the category of a chayim, and so is an elephant. Or certainly not chayim behema. They're any less alike. But again, the problem is not that one is a chayim, one is a behema. The problem is that one is kosher and one is not. Like a dog, which is in the category of a chayim, and an eiz and a goat. Another example, a tzvi, a deer, and a pig. See, a deer is kosher and a pig is not. A tzvi is a chaya, and a pig is a behema. The chaya is a behem. And I'll call elu like him in a Torah. Sha'achaya b'chlal behemi, chayas are included or are considered animals, as we learned in Macholas Asuris. The issue is b'chlal, not chaya behema. Doesn't make a difference here. Only Tahira and Tameya. Aval now, in other words, we're a lot more lenient. In other words, mating is a lot more strict, like we learned before, right? We're not allowed to mate even two tahar animals together, or two tamei, if they are two different species. So says that Rambam that by rabbinic law, kol shnei minim shehem kalayim barba, any two species that may not be mated together, we're not allowed to plow with them together, or to pull with them, or to lead them. That's a rabbinic prohibition. And then you get it's a rabbinic violation for which you get makanoise makas mardus. For also lahanik behema minaya bashal im chayish bayam, cannot harness a land creature with a sea creature. And I remember the Gemara speaking about these things. It's very unusual, but they would harness a goat with a shibut, that's some sort of large fish. It's very common that when ships, they were not as big, nearly as big as the ships you are imagining nowadays. But when they would come in from sea, sometimes they would have merchandise and they would want to bring it as close as possible to the destination. So there would be certain river or other water channels that the ship would be led through. Today in the Panama Canal, right? Every big ships are being led through. And what would lead it through? So they would have people on both sides of the banks, or they would harness animals. And there was a certain fish sometimes that if the fish was there, they would harness it, part of the fish. The fish wasn't strong enough, so they would harness it to a goat. Now, that's prohibited only midrabanan. It's only us in midrabanan because these two creatures cannot function as a team in an ordinary manner. Come on, one is a sea creature, one is a land creature. Nevertheless, the Chachamim prohibited any two species. Halacha 9, and a wagon is being drawn by these mixed species. So now the guy that's in the wagon will also get malchus, even though he's just sitting in the wagon and he's not holding on to the reins. Why? Because his mere sitting over there causes the animal to walk. With animals that are burden animals, when they feel someone in the taxi, when they feel someone in the car, they know they got to move. So your being there is somehow causing them to move. Both of them. And what happens if there's also someone sitting by the reins? They're both chayiv malchus. And even if there were 100 people, we don't say since two people are sitting together, each one takes only half of the sin. If 100 people are leading two animals that are halachically mixed species together, they all get malchus. Now, halacha yud, this prohibition is only between Tahoira and Tameya in the animal kingdom, which includes behemoths and chayas and midraban and fish. You know what? It does not include a man and an animal. A man and an animal are allowed to work together. And that's us. What's a person? A neshama and a behemoth. And God put us together. Makes sense? If I can work with me, I can work with a behemoth. For example, like an Adam who's plowing with an ox. That's the most common way it used to be done then. You harness it to the ox, but you're there, you're the brains over there. By Moshe Chagolo, you can schlep a wagon together with the donkey. Because when the Torah says that we may not, it says b'shoir u'b'chamoir yachdav, not b'adam v'chamoir, which is okay. Not b'adam v'shor, because that's okay. Final halacha. No. In society, people think that no. We're Adam. I'm just giving an example that since Hashem put together these two things, that we're schlepping life is two beings working together. We have to work together. The godly soul and the animal soul have to work together. So it makes sense that if that's the way Hashem made it internally, that's the way it's allowed to be done externally. But it wouldn't be consistent. It wouldn't make sense. Halacha Yudal. Behemoth, but now here you have a Gavaldik Kedin. An animal that was consecrated to go on the altar, and it halachically became now invalid to go on the altar. Such an animal may be redeemed. However, even after it's redeemed, there is a vestige of holiness that remains on the animal, and there are certain restrictions. Certain things may never be done again with that animal. So these animals, even though it's one animal, halachically, the Torah considers it two bodies because it used to be holy. Now it became holy and mundane together. So it is like this one being is like a behemoth and a behemoth that are mixed together. Wow. And that what? That the im kol behemoth asher lo yakriv memeno karban Hashem. So that pasuk that we are quoting, and therefore, you plowed with only one ox. But we're saying that halachically, this ox is like a tohir and tameya. Oy hamar bi a boy, or if you make this ox with another ox, you're chayiv malkis. This is not midrabanan. That's midoiraisa. That's the meaning in the pasuk. Im kol behemoth tameya. Asher lo yakriv memenu karban Hashem v'goymer. Arei zeloiket mishum kalayim. Yisuzeh medivrei kabbalah. I got it. In other words, the pasuk is an asmachta, but it's asur from God, as Hashem told us to Moshe Rabbeinu, and passed down all the way down to us. Beautiful. Okay, my friends, we are now starting the 10th chapter, which is also the final chapter of the laws of Kalayim. This is the chapter regarding mixed fabrics. Guys, this is fascinating. This is relatively a very long chapter. It has 32 halachas, and very relevant for nowadays. And let's begin with halacha aleph. Ein asur b'kila bigadim. The prohibition against using, wearing, benefiting from a mixed fabric is only if the mixed fabrics is tzemer upishtim bilvad. It's only regarding a mixture of wool and linen. That's the beginning of everything. Shenamar, as it says, here we have again a pasuk from Parshas Kiseitze, loy silba shatnes. And so the mixture is called shatnes. And the Torah right away defines explicitly, mazeh shatnes, what type of mixed fabrics, tzemer upishtim yachtov, wool and linen together. Now, says the Rambam, v'yesh b'krachei hayam, in certain faraway islands or countries, there is something which is kamoy tzemer, something that looks like wool. What is that? It's something that grows on the stones in the Yam HaMelech. It grows on the stones in the Mediterranean Sea. And tavnisoy kitabnis azov, it resembles gold. V'hurach b'yoyser, it's very soft, and it's called kolach. Now, some people put kolach in the category of silk, but we're not putting this in the category of silk. Actually, we'll see in a moment that normally silk resembles, it's not, but it resembles linen. This is something, kolach, even if it's a type of silk, as he explains, it's something that comes out of the stones, it resembles wool. And therefore, because of, not midrabanan, we call this marasayin, it gives an impression. And if someone is going to see you or me wearing kolach together with linen, it looks like we are allowed to make a garment of a mixture of wool and linen, not to give off that impression. It looks like lamb's wool. And another marasayin of shatnez, shirayim. Now, guys, shirayim is silk, and kolach are also because marasayin. Because, like I just said, that silk resembles linen. Halacha beis, Rachel baseis. Look at the hemshech of the prakim here. So a Rachel is a lamb. The Eis is a goat. Yaron, there's nothing wrong with wool of a goat to be mixed with linen. But what happens if a lamb is a hybrid? Its wool is not prohibited biblically from Kalayim because it's not pure lamb. There is a mixture with a goat. We don't say father, mother. It doesn't matter who the mother is, who the father is. Avol, also who midivrei, but it's also midrabanan, and also because of manasai. Now we have to understand what's called a mixture. Here it gets a little bit tricky. There's biblical mixture and rabbinic mixture. Obviously, both are prohibited. The question is on what level. When they are connected in any manner, it becomes kalayim min ha-Torah. Ketzad, semer upishtim. That sheterafam zebozeh, you mix them together, and you comb them together. See, that's the thing. words, they have to go through these steps together. Because you began with the raw material prior to them being threads. They're not threads yet. You take raw wool, you take raw linen, you mix them together. Shah means you comb them together, and you make from them levadim. You turn them into a smooth mass, so they're not even fibers. That's kalayim. Said from if you mix them v'tava oisam and you comb them ke'echad, and now v'oreg beged mitvizem. Now you wove a garment from this combed fabric. Tvi is combed. So now that's called kalayim. Halacha gimel tafar. If you sewed a beged of tzemer bishal pishton, in other words, you sewed a beged of tzemer, a woolen fabric into linen, not into a linen beged, into linen. Even if you sewed it together with silk, oy shetafar beged tzemer, you sewed a woolen garment with pishton threads. Oy beged, and now let's go. The beged is pishton, and you sewed it together with threads of wool. Oy kashar chutei tzemer, you tied woolen threads, bechutei pishton with linen threads. Chavra halkop or gidalon. Who knows what gidalon means? Growing it doesn't mean growing it here. It means you braided them together. Even if you put them together in a sack, you put them together in a box. So far, they're not connected. But once they are in this common sack, now you wound them together. And even if you tied a braid of wool, with the braid of linen, even if you have a strap of leather that's in between these two braids, well, if you folded one beged in the other beged, you folded two garments together, nothing wrong with that. But now you tie them together. And as we'll see, the Isur is not to tie them together. The Isur now will be to wear them. As it says, it's a very inclusive statement. So says the Rambam, Mikol Mokai. No matter how they are yachtov, Kivin Shenesached, Nesar. Halachadalo. Because one would have argued that it's only if they were mamish woven together, it was tying is enough. So the Rambam gives a gavaldik proof. The Torah needed to tell us, to hint to us, that if tzitzis has this mixture, then it's okay. And where do we learn that from? From juxtapositions, like the fact that the Torah puts two dinim together, that in itself is for a purpose. And the reason why the Torah made a smichus between Parshas Kalayim and Parshas Tzitzis is only to let you know that when there is a mitzvah to wear tzitzis, not at night, during the day, then you are allowed to have tzitzis, even though it's made out of Kalayim. Now listen, by tzitzis, what would Kalayim look like? I'll just give you an example. If the beged is made out of linen, and at least the tchelis has to be made out of wool. But if you're going to put the tzitzis and the tchelis on a linen garment, which midoraisa is allowed, the Rabbanon, we're not allowed to do that. But midoraisa, that's allowed. They're not woven together. The wool is only tied onto it. That's the whole way you make tzitzis, You put it through a big hole and you make knots. That's called tied on. It's not woven in. And nevertheless, if not for the tzitzis being a mitzvah, and the Torah explicitly through the smich was letting you know that it's okay, it would have been awesome. Why not say it will only be awesome with the Rabbanan? No, God would never do something. You understand? Something that's only awesome with the Rabbanan. Doesn't make sense. Is that right that it's even awesome with the Doiraisa? Gavaldik. Now, halacha hakilayim ein lo shir. There isn't a minimum measure. Meaning, afilu chut kolshu. Even if you have the smallest thread of tzemet that's woven into a beged gadol shel pishtin, oy shel pishtin with tzemet, it's going to be aser. Halacha vav tzemet echelim v'tzever gemalim. a wool of a female lamb, right? A ewe, I think it's called in English, and the wool of a camel. That they were mixed one and the other. You made from them a tvi. It means you made a thread, and you made a thread. Okay, I have to just correct before. Yeah, shah is combing and tvi is a thread. If half of it is made out of ewes or lambs wool, in other words, it's not the minority. Even though it's 50, the other 50 is af camel. Camel's wool is not a wool concerning this halacha. It's still, all of it is considered semer. And then, but the moment the roiv is from gemalim, guys, that's the key. Mutter l'arvei mapishtin. And not only is it mutter midoiraisa, but why not say at least it's midrabanan problematic? Also not. Why? Because it looks like camel's wool. They have in there certain threads of orachelim. Why? Because they're not threads yet. In other words, wool is not threads. If it would have been a thread, what did the Rambam write? That afilu chut kolshu. It's not a chut yet. And therefore, oidos hakevasim, sheep's hides, which is great because sheep's hides, yeah, there's wool on it, but there's no threads yet. Choice when we got them. If you make garments pure out of that, even if you are also tying it together with linen, mutarim. That to have some strands of the wool that's going to get mixed with the linen, and even though they become entwined with linen threads that is used to sew it. But the key is the wool is not yet woolen threads. It's simply the raw wool connected still to the hide. Here there is bittul. It's okay. And again, even lachatchila, even midrabanan, sharei batlu b'meutan. So here we have a big thing. Thread is one thing, and wool is something else. Wool could be bottled. There are times when it's bottled. Threads are not bottled. Halacha ches. V'chein hakin base or cannabis, known here as marijuana or touched as hemp, and linen that are mixed one with the other. They are similar, but they're not the same. So we say the same concept. Here again, here the linen is not yet threaded, it's just raw. Im roiv min cannabis, then it's bottled, the linen. And now mutter le'ereg atfi mehem im chutei tzemer. Then it's asur. Halacha 9. If you make a garment only out of camel's wool, or only out of tzemer arnovim, let's touch that a arneves, right, one of the 4 unique animals that Torah mentions, let's call that a rabbit. Let's go with that. So rabbit's wool, guys, both of these wools are not problematic as far as shatnez is concerned. Or you make a baguette of cannabis. And now, the arag boy chut shall tzemer mitzadze. In one side, you sewed in a chut of tzemer. In the other side, they're not touching each other. There's a thread of linen. But now you have 2 threads. And like we mentioned, threads are never bottled. Even though these 2 threads are not touching each other, but they are both connected to this neutral garment. Now the whole thing is asur because of kilayim, gevaldik. Halacha yud, beged semer shenifram. When a woolen garment becomes torn, if it becomes torn, mutar lifreif oisei bechut pishtan, you are allowed to join it together. Joining it together, not sewing it together. Joining it together and somehow knotting it, even though you're using a linen thread, but you're not allowed to sew it. In other words, you're tying it around like a belt. Right, something is whole, you bunch it up together. It's not pretty, it's not professional, but that's not a problem. Person is allowed to wear 2 separate garments at the same time. One is a garment made out of wool. One is a garment made out of linen. Even though he's putting a belt around his body, and the belt is chapping both of these begadim. He should not somehow pull this rope and tie them between his shoulders. In other words, don't wind together the cords of each fabric. I think that's what it means. You can use a separate belt. You cannot wind the cords of each fabric together. That's what it means. Halacha yud beis. Kilei begadim. Now let's go back to if someone made halachic kalayim. It's what's the isur? It's not something again like the mixture of meat and milk that you cannot derive benefit from it. Not over here. Here it's more permitted. Mutar lasoisim. First of all, you are allowed to make it. You are allowed to sell it. Wow. The prohibition is only can't wear it, nor can you cover yourself with it by putting it on you. And that's the pasuk, either loy silbash shatnes, that's called wearing a garment, or it says in Kedoshim lo yala olecha, don't even put it on you, which means to be machasi yourself with it. Ho'aliyah shehi derech levisha. What type of putting it on you if it's like a garment, if it's directly on you? What other types of putting something over you? What happens if you make a tent and the material of the tent covering is made out of shatnez? There's absolutely no problem. Aval oil shul kalayim mutar leishev tachtov. V'chein mutar min hatoira leishev al matzois. If you have some sort of spread, some sort of mattress, which is made out of kalayim, you're only laying on it. It's not on you. You are on it. Min hatoira, the ladder. Min derabanan, the ladder is problematic, but at least min hatoira, it's okay because it says lo yalo lecha. You can put it under you. However, regarding an oil, there's no rabbinic addition. Regarding if there is a mattress or a spread of shatnez underneath you, it's problematic. It's also even eser matzoy zu al gabi zu. Even if you have 10 spreads, and only the bottommost one is made out of kalayim, it's far away from you. You may not sit down on the top one. Why? Because maybe a strand that will come out of the bottom one will somehow wind its way, it will wind itself on top of you. That there's such a chash, only berakin, if the spreads are made out of soft fabrics, like iriyas, like face curtains, garments, dresses, soft. But if they are themselves hard, meaning she'einam nichrachim, they don't wind, they're not windable, like karamuksasas, like pillows and cushions. You're not hard like a stone, but they're not. Maybe not today's pillow cover, pillow outer parts. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something that doesn't wind itself. Muted, you are allowed to sit if you're not directly on it. You can sit on them, you can recline on them, as long as they are not touching your flesh. Halacha yudalid. Paroiches doesn't mean what you think about a curtain. Let's touch. Paroiches means a drape. No, it's something that's hanging by the windows, but it's heavy. If it's made out of kalayim, so if it's soft, it's also to put on the curtain, to put on the drape. Why? Because Shema Yisamach Shamish. Maybe the servant, guy working in the house, at times will get tired to lean on it, and while he does it, vitala al basari, because if it's soft, at that moment it can wrap itself around the person. But if it's a harder material, that it doesn't wind, it's not subject to being wound, then muteres. Halachat azvav mino slippers that's made out of kalayim. The eloi okef, it doesn't have. See, a okef, I know that the literal taich is the heel. We're not talking about that over here. An okef would mean that some shoes didn't only function as protecting the bottom of your feet from not getting hurt on the ground, on the stones on the ground, but it also went up the person's lower leg. Going up the person's lower leg, that's called a beged. That's problematic. It didn't have that part. It's only the bottom. Mutar l'lavshay. Because sha'oir haregel kashahu, the eina nehene kishar oiragov. Because even though it's directly on the body, since the skin of the bottom of the foot of a person is hard, it's desensitized, and it won't have hana'ah from the warmth, even if the bottom sole will provide some sort of warmth. It doesn't experience that. Now, it does experience it being protected from the harshness of the ground. That's not the hana'ah, that's awesome. It's not the hana'ah of a beggar. Halacha tezai, koifik sus, when people, seamstress, people that are sewing garments. Now, when they would sew garments, it was common when they're making the garment that they would lay the material over their legs. Now, it's over your legs. Yeah, but they're not placing it. And we said before that the Isra of Kalayim isn't only to wear it, but also to cover yourself with it. They're not doing it to cover themselves. Their kavanah is not to have hana'ah. Their kavanah is like, where do they put it? That's where they put it. They're allowed to do it. But if, let's say, the sun is beating on you, and you are aware of it, and now when you're sewing these garments, you're allowed to make it. You're making it for goyim, right? Which is okay. You're benefiting from the fact that this garment, while it's on your legs, it's protecting you from getting burnt. Or when it's freezing, now it's protecting you from the cold or protecting you from the rain. That's a problem. No, it's your intent will be of great significance. However, even though when it's not with that kavanah, it's allowed, nevertheless, hatsunuyim doesn't mean the modest. It means the people that are meticulous, people that are very careful in the observance of the mitzvahs. They will never put it on top of them. They'll put the garment, the fabric, on the ground. Today, they would put it on a table. When people would sell garments, either both for transportation and also to a certain degree to model them, they would drape it over the shoulders. They would not wear it for hana. It was simply showing the person what the garment looks like. If it's going to be folded up, the potential customer doesn't see it. So they can wear it that way. Kedarka means they don't put their hands in the sleeves, they don't put the pants on their body, etc. But the way they draped it over their shoulders, that's not called wearing it, and they're not getting hana if that's not their kavanah. Again, that if it's very hot and this is protecting them from the sun and that's their kavanah, also that's a problem. And like we learned before, that these tsunuyim, these meticulous ones, even when they had no such kavanah, nevertheless, mafshilim b'makil, they would have a pole that would extend away from the body, and they would only show it off by hanging it from the pole and never draping it over the shoulders. Halacha Yud Zayin, if a person, there's an egg, and it's boiling hot, and you want to move it from here to there. So they would have these begodim made out of kalayim, and you're not dressing yourself in the beged, you're using it as a cloth to grab the egg. Don't do that, because you are benefiting from it. In other words, you don't want for your hand to get burned from the heat of the egg, or the opposite. Whatever you're chopping is very cold. You don't want to get cold. That's called hana. Even if it's only aray. The Rambam will give a great example. You're not allowed to do that. And even if you're wearing 10 garments, one on top of the other, and the outermost one is kalayim, you're not having hana, but you're wearing it. And the best example we have over here is lignoi v'sameches. People, there's duties. When you go from one place to the other, if you're bringing merchandise, you have to pay tax on it. But if you're wearing it, they're not going to charge you for tax. So here you have a person who wants to pay less tax, and they're going from point A to point B. They're going through a checkpoint where there is a tax people. So instead of them having a suit on them, and they're not going to be harassed for that, they're not going to be asked for taxes, and they have a suit in their luggage, they put on 2 suits, 2 jackets, and the guy doesn't notice that. They don't need it. That's also awesome because they're wearing it. If im lavash kain, they're like midoy rice. Halacha yutas. Ein awesome mishum kalayim ela begadam shem darachim. And the clothing themselves has to be types of clothing that are made to provide for warmth. For example, ikotoinas, a shirt, a mitznefes, a hat, a mechnasayim, a pants, v'ha'avnei, a belt, v'asimla is a woman's dress, ubegadim shemachapin bahem es ashrikayim. You have these knee pants, call them undergarments, or yodayim, garments only meant to cover your hands. We call that gloves. All of that, if it is made out of kalayim, that's where the Torah tells you do not wear it. But aval silsulim ketanim, but small belts. That people will make them into pockets. What's the pocket part? The pocket is made out of kalayim, pocket which is only made to put money in it, or litzror behem tavalim, or to put spices in it, or usem martut, a rag, kerchief. Shemanichan alatia, which on it you put a bandage, or certain types of dressings, and then you put it on a wound. In other words, it was not meant for a beged, and it's mutar even if your body will be touching it. Halacha chav. Tzitz shel oid. Tzitz is a forehead piece made out of leather. or made out of silk. But out of this forehead piece, there are certain strands that are hanging down. Those strands were hanging down in areas where there's a lot of bugs. So people would have these begodim. You have it until today, certain hats. And when you're walking around, those strands are banging back and forth, and they're shooing away all of these disturbing chayalach. And you put some strands of wool, some strands of linen that are miduldolim al panei ha'adam kedei lahav riach hazavuvim, to shoot the flies away. Ein by mishum kalayim, because ein derechim amaka. Halacha chafal. Hamanik behemoths. If a person is leading animals, and every animal has its own leash, and what happens if one leash is made out of wool, one leash is made out of linen, and can you grab onto them together? Yes, you could. And even though you're korchan al yadi, even though you're winding them on your hand, you're winding them, but what may you not do? You may not tie them together. And then once you tie them together, you may not bind them around your hand. You may not wind them around your hand. Towels, used to clean your hands, and other types of coverings that are used to wipe down utensils, wipe down the floor. We call them mantles. Barber, the barber type of shirt they put over your garment, so when they give you a haircut, your garment should be less soiled from your own hair. All of them is asura mishum kalayim. Ois means a sign. The ois here refers to some sort of cloth, fragments of cloth that were made into tickets that were sewed on your garments either by koifs and by launderers or gardiam by weavers. In other words, if someone professionally is laundering many people's clothing or they're fixing many people's clothing, and they don't want for it to come to be that I don't know who gave me what. So they want to identify each garment with its owner's name. So they would take an ois, they would take this fragment of a cloth ticket, and they would have the person's name on it, or they would remember that the red one is from Reuven, the blue one is from Shimon, etc. So if a person sews that on a garment, for everyone to identify which garment belongs to them, if you have a linen ticket on a woolen garment. I'm sorry, you have a woolen ticket on a linen garment, or the opposite. Even though it's not chashuv and it's temporary, doesn't matter. You have a cloth that's sewn onto a cloth. That when you did it, the problem will be to wear it. Then you cannot wear that garment. If you have a woolen beged that was joined together in beged pishtan. How was it joined together? With only one thrust of the needle, one stitch. That's not called connected. And therefore, it's not called kalayim. But if you gather the two head of the threads together, or if you made two stitches, then it's kalayim. That's called connected. You can make tachrichin out of kalayim. Why? Because of the rule she'ein al ha-mesim mitzvah. Because meitzim don't have mitzvahs. And that's the whole sugya that we have a few times in Shas. Hold on. The challenge with this is in Ksubis is that when Tchias HaMesim will happen, not only will the dead be resurrected, but together with that, the garments that were used, which is a tachrichem, to bury them with, will be somehow reconstituted. And that's the issue. The issue is that they're getting up with their tachrichem, with their own garments, in which they were buried. That will be the counter to that. And that's the whole sugya of yesh mitzvahs la'asad lavai, or a mitzvahs la'asad lavai. The Rebbe has an opinion that since at that point the world is going to be so permeated with Kedusha, it will not subject itself at all to any violation of God's will. So when that tachrichin will reconstitute itself, it's going to reject the wool or the linen part of it. I know, it's right over here. So you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to make tachrichin because she'ein ala meisa mitzvah when they're buried with it. Shut. You are allowed to make a mardas, a saddle blanket for a donkey, and to sit on it. Because it's hard. Again, loyala alecha. We learned that, right? But under you, it's not problematic. I made that Rabbanan is problematic. It's only if it's soft. This is not a mardas. But you cannot directly be touching it. Another thing, don't put a mardas on your shoulder because you're putting it on you. And even if you're putting it on your shoulder, not to protect yourself from the heat or from the rain, but only lohitzi elav hazevel, you're taking out something that's very foul smelling. You want to protect yourself from shmutz. Can't do that. Halach chavav meis v'habehemam shoyim elubashim kalayim mutar lenasan al ksefai. Wow, gavaldik. Because you're not directly having it on you. Halacha chav zayin beged semer. By chut pishtin, a linen thread got lost somehow into an entire garment of tzemer. Now we learned about bittul, but not by threads. Remember, threads are not button. By beged pishtin she'avad by chut semer. Not only is it a problem, but here you may not even sell it to a goy, because kalayim you can sell to a goy. Everyone can see it's kalayim. We're not afraid the goy is going to sell it to a yid, and the yid won't know. Everyone can see it, but here there's only one thread. And now shema yimkar oisa goy li Yisrael. And he'll end up using it without knowing. Similarly, don't make such a thing into a saddle. Making bona fide kalayim into a saddle of a donkey is okay. Everyone will see. But again, there's only one thread. It's lost. Why? Because here, maybe a person is going to choose to turn the saddle into some sort of patch. And he's going to wear it. We're not chayish that in halacha chafei, because there you can see when kalayim is mamash a mixture. Here it's only one thread and everything else. Shadei ena kalayim nikar boy. So what should you do? You can find it, and if you can't find it, dye it. You see, dye takes hold of wool and on linen very differently. Then you'll see the difference. Then you'll see where it is. Soivoy she'enat semer v'apishtam oilam et seva echad umiyad hu nikar, and then you'll be able to remove it. V'shamtoi ve'im loy nikar, and if you don't see it, then you know it's not there. Vaday. How did it go? Yeah, because it was somehow removed before. Shema nishmat v'halachloi, because you made a bedika and you couldn't find it. Which is why you could, because midoiraisa it's not called kalayim, it's only midrabanan, and therefore you can rely on the fact that you made a bedika. When you are purchasing woolen garments from a goy, it look very well. Maybe there is some sort of linen thread in it. And by the way, that's what we do nowadays when we buy a suit. Why are we giving it over to the shatnez, to the people that know how to check for shatnez? Because in the linings, which is very common, which is behind the collar, or sometimes where you put the buttons, it can say 100% wool, but there can be linen in there. If you see biblical kalayim on someone else, even if that person is in the public arena, he's in the marketplace, you have to jump and tear it off. And even if it's on your Rebbe that taught you Torah, you are humiliating that person, which you are, but you're not doing it to humiliate him. You're doing it to give glory to God. Kavod Abriyos, she'ein Kavod Abriyos, doichet Isur. Loisa said that's written explicitly in the Torah. We're saying explicitly. Now, why does Kavod Abriyos at times override a biblical mitzvah of Hashavas Haveda, as we learned that if you have a zaken, that even if he would have lost that article, that's his, because of him being a dignified person and he doesn't schlep things in the public arena, he would leave it. If it's Eino Lefi Kavoida, he doesn't have to return it. But why not? There's a mitzvah. And another, because that's a negative commandment, which ultimately is about money, returning someone's finances. What about Tumas Meis? What's Tumas Meis? A Nazir may not be Metama himself for Meis. But if there's a Meis mitzvah, he's Mechuyev to be Metama himself. There that we haven't explained, there the Torah hints to it by the Parsha of Nesirus, where it says, Ula Achoisoi, without repeating this right now because we're late, that extra La Achoisoi is to tell you that only Ula Achoisoi Eda Matama. Yes, Matama Lameis Mitzvah. But all of that coming back is, in other words, Kavod Habriyas is not going to trump an explicit lav on the Torah, and therefore coming back, if someone is wearing kalayim, that's midoy raisa kalayim, he has to remove it. Other people have to remove it, even if there'll be shame connected to it. Something that's only Yasam Rabbanan, that the rule is that Isur Rabbanan will be pushed aside because of Kavod Habriyas always. Every Rabbanan is a Daraisa. The answer is, In other words, the Torah didn't write explicitly regarding every single derabanan. It's a general. That kavod abrius will trump. And therefore, if someone is wearing shatna shel devreim, einoi koida olav bashuk. Ve'eino poishet bashuk. If you find it on yourself, you don't uncover yourself in the marketplace. Go to your house. But if you discover, oi gavalt, I'm wearing shatnez, remove it right away. No, there's no kavod abrius here. Allah alam. Halovish kalayim. If a person garbed himself in a beged of kalayim, or if you covered yourself, yes, yale olecha, you did what God said not to do, you like. Now, what happens if you're wearing it the whole day? So how many times are you chayiv malka? So here goes the rules. Wearing it the whole day, you only like it once, because you are chayiv malchus for putting it on. What happens if you remove your head, just your head, and then you put it back? Even though you did not remove the entirety of the garment, you'll be then chayiv al kolachas v'aretz. Now, that if you're not dressing, undressing, you only got dressed once. Even though you're wearing it the whole day, you only chayiv one set of malchus. That's only if you only had one set of asra. But if you have this person constantly telling you, what are you doing? Take it off. And you didn't take it off. And in between every hasra take it off, there was enough time in order for you to take it off and to put that garment back on. Then chayiv kol shiyah v'shiyah shisraboy allow, even though de facto you didn't take it off. Allah lamed alef. Hamalbish es chaveira kelaim. If a person put kelaim on someone else. So like this. If the loivesh was a mazid, the loivesh is the person upon whom the garment was placed, and the malbesh is the person putting it on. So if the loivesh knew that he's not allowed to have that on him, then the loivesh is chayiv malbesh. And Bahamalbish, the person putting it on, is oivim mishum l'fnei v'leisitin michshel. But ve'im lo yada haloivish abeget kalayim, the only known sinner was the malbish. The malbish will be like him, and the loivish is a shoygig, so he'll be potter. And the final halach of this chapter, halach lamed beis, kohanim sholofshu bigdei kahuna. And the Rambam holds that the avnate, even of the kohen hedyot, had in it a mixture. Everything was mainly linen, but there was some tchelis, which are tchelis voices on wool. So if they're wearing it not during their avodah, even if they are in the temple area, they're like it, because the avenit is kalayim. Which is then a mitzvah say like tzitzis, and not b'shas avodah. So when they stop doing the avodah, they immediately would remove the avnit. And we say brich rachman the sayon. And now, with God's help, we are going to be starting the next series, Hilchos Matnas Adiyim. We're going to be learning about the laws of the gifts that we are obligated to give to the poor. Let's go read together. Yesh B'chlal and learn together. Yesh B'chlal and Shloish Esed Mitzvahs. A total of 13 mitzvahs. Sheva mitzvahs aseh v'sheish mitzvahs lois aseh v'zeh upratim. Aleph, to leave payah, as we'll see in a moment in the first chapter what payah is. And number 2, shelo yechal hapayah. Don't remove the edges completely. Number 3, to leave leket. We'll explain each one when we get there. And shelo yelaket haleket. Don't remove the leket. Number 5, to leave lazoiv oilolis bekerim. To leave the underdeveloped grape clusters. Grape clusters. That's peret is grapes. Oilolis is grape clusters. And shelo oilo lakerim. Not to gather it. Lazoiv peret hakerim. To leave the grape, as we'll see, the underdeveloped grape. Shelo yelaket peret hakerim. Number 9, to leave shikha, as will be defined, and shelo yoshel lakach, as don't go back and get that which you forgot. Number 11, lahafresh ma'aser aniyim. Number 12, to give tzedakah, kemisas yad, according to your capacity, as we'll explain all. Number 13, shelo ya'ames levav yelo ani, do not restrain one's heart from giving to the poor. Will be mitzvahs elu, will be beprakim elu and yidden. Let's start with the first chapter. The first chapter is a very general chapter. It's going to give us all of the different categories of matnas aniyim, of gifts that Hashem wants us to leave to the poor. There are different categories, and at least we'll touch upon the most general rule of each category. And then as we go through these series, we're going to unpackage each one with a lot more detail. So let's go. Perek Rishon has 15 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says that when you're harvesting your field, do not harvest the entirety of your field. Ella, this is payah, right? You should leave a small portion for the aniyim at the edge, and any edge that you want. That little edge that you're leaving doesn't have to have any specific size. We'll see it doesn't even have to have any specific amount. You have to leave at least a 60th, as we'll learn. And that's the meaning of the pasuk in Emor. Don't completely harvest it. And that doesn't only go if you are koitzer. Reaping it is when you're using a keli, you're using a sickle or a knife or some other type of hatchet. Whether you're harvesting it that way or whether you are removing the produce by uprooting it, doesn't make a difference. Equally, you're chayiv to leave some small portion at any edge of the field. That which you leave over is called peyam. Halacha beis. Just like you have this obligation by a field, the same as when it comes to a orchard. By Ilonis. That kishoisav esper is same when you're harvesting, when you're gathering all of the fruits, leave a little bit for the aniyim. What happens if you violated while you are harvesting, meaning avar v'katzar eskola soda or asav eskola peiras. So first of all, you violated, but you can fix it. How can you fix it? By now giving that which you should have left to the poor. Like and give it to the aniyim. And this giving it now to the aniyim is a compensation of. It's a tikkun of, and it's a positive commandment. As it says, taza means to leave it for them, but it also means to give it to them. And until when are you obligated? Even if it was a grain field, and not only did you gather it all, but you already did all the steps. You already ground it up into flour, and you already kneaded it, and you already made bread out of it. You have bread. If the bread is still here, give some of the bread to the aniyim, and now you fixed the lav. What happens if you harvested it all? And now whatever you harvested from this field was completely lost or burnt. That means you can't fix it by now fulfilling the mitzvah. And now you're going to be chayiv malchus for the fact that you didn't leave it. You know, the malchus is, why weren't you chayiv malchus before? Because you could have fixed it by doing a positive commandment. But now in the case where it got all burnt, Halacha Daled, we'll have him Pedig Daled. We'll see. Everyone is discussed in more details, but the Rambam is giving again, like we said, a general overview in all of the categories of matanos for the aniyim. So leket means, what does it mean? It means when a person is harvesting grain or binding the grain together. Lo yelaket hashabalim, don't gather those stalks that fell during the harvest. There was a stalk or two that fell, leave it on the ground. And that's the meaning of the pasuk. If you violated the same thing, you violated, you can still make it up as long as it's there. And even if you didn't only gather it, but now you already made it into flour and you made it into bread, but you have the bread. But if at some point after you gathered it all, you gathered the leket, not at all, you gathered the leket, the next category, pettit. Pettit is individual grapes that fell during the harvest. You're cropping the clusters, grapes fell on the ground. You're supposed to leave it. They individualize themselves from the clusters of grapes while you were doing bitzira, while you were harvesting grapes. Oilelos are complete underdeveloped grape clusters that you are going to leave on the vine because they're underdeveloped. That you have to leave them there permanently. As it says, if a person is binding sheaves and you forgot one, we'll see it's one or two. It's when you have bundles on the field, then you go and collect them. You forgot one. Once you forgot it, don't come back and get it. And if you went back and you took it, and again, you shouldn't have done it, you're not going to get malchus because it's nit koila asay. At what point? Even when it's already into bread. Said that they are all considered the mitzvahs loisa, that they can be corrected by later fulfilling this positive commandment, and therefore you're not going to be chayv malchus by the violation itself. But im loikim asay shabahem, then you're going to be chayv malchus for the violation of the negative commandment. Just like the prohibition, right, of taking the forgotten produce is by sheaves, which is as we just explained. The same applies to standing grain. Again, all of this will be unpackaged with greater detail. In other words, if you walk by standing grain and you didn't bundle it up while it's still standing, you walk by, you forgot it, got to leave it. You're harvesting and you forgot a little portion. We'll see what that little is. Furthermore, it's not only by grains, it's also by trees, by orchards. For example, when the Torah gives an example by olives, it's not only olives, it's just one example of trees. That when you're beating your olive tree, they would beat the olive tree to get the olives to fall down. Don't go back to take all of its glory. The glory of a tree has its fruits. Some of the fruits will remain on the tree. Once you walk by it, I will see later more details, you got to leave it. And just like the Torah explicitly gives as an example by olives, by Zaysim. And say so now let's put it all together. Which is peret, it's unique, right? An individual grape that fell during harvest. You left on the vine the underdeveloped grape clusters, shikha and peah. And shalosh matanis batfua, lekad shikha and peah. Ushtayim b'shari ilonis peah and shikha. Beautiful. Halacha ches kol matnas anim elu. You know, some gifts, we get to choose to whom we give it to. Not these. These you have to leave it in the field, which means you don't even have the Toivas Hana to decide who it's going to go. Leave it there. Even if the ani is not someone that you like, it's not yours to choose even. The afilu ani should be Yisrael. Another than if there is an ani that owns a field, and he also has to leave his payah and his leket and his shikha, right, for other aniyim. Beautiful. And he cannot collect it himself. And if he did it, we take it away from him. Halachanai. Kol ger. Which is also those who are allowed to collect. It's only referring to a ger tzedek and not a ger toishev. There the Torah juxtaposes one with the other. Taka only by Meiser Oni, but that's going to teach us for the rest of the Torah. Now, just like a Levi is a ben bris, after ger is a ben bris. Afal pikein, if you have non-Yiddish gerim coming and joining to collect, we don't stop them. And if they come, Yisrael, they can take. Why? Darkei Shalom. Allah Yud says by Matnas Aniyim, Lo'ani v'lager tazav oisem. So here we have another limit that calls man shaniyim toivin oisem. As long as they are still pursuing it, that's when you have to leave it for them. But the moment it comes to a point that the aniyim gave up of finding anything in your field, or it's something so insignificant that they don't care for it, that's called Pasko Aniyim Lavakish Lachzir Aleim. Now you can take it yourself. It's not the owners, but the owner could take it as well as any other wealthy person. And this is not like Truma. Truma has to go to the client. There's a Kedusha. There's no Kedusha here. Here it's only, its value has to go to Aniyim. If it would say the Nasan, it will be different. It says Kazoi Voisam. And if there's no more aniyim wanting it, then it's not yours, but you can take it like any other non-ani can take it. Now let's put this into practice. So the din is that when aniyim went through fields, they gathered the leket, and then you had the second batch of aniyim. And they are looking for smaller things. Once the second one's already passed, everyone says whatever is there is nothing or nothing significant. The second group of gatherers, then no one else is going to go there. What they would do is, when it came to vineyards, the same group of aniyim that went to a field, they would walk from the beginning, Mizrach Lamaidev, and then they would walk back Mizrach Lamaidev Lamizrach. They would go back and forth. Hanishad Acharchein, Achrechein Mutal Chaladam. Allah Ume'emasai Kaladam Mutar Mashik Hoshal Zaysam Eretz Yisrael, so Im Shaka Choisam Beroish Hazayis. Hare Zem Mutarba, then you will only be allowed to take it, you meaning a non-ani, including the owner, only from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which is Man Revia Shnia, it's the time for the second rain. In late years, we're not going to go into right now, but because of there constantly being an adjustment of our calendar year to realign the solar and the lunar. So when does winter start? Not every year at the same time, right? We all know that, right? We have to readjust it, and every 3 years, it's readjusted. Anyways, because since Rosh Chodesh Kislev, in a year where winter will begin later, that is the time of the second rains. Only from then on will no ani come back and get it. But if there are masses of gathered olives that are under a tree, there you don't have to wait until Rosh Chodesh Kislev, but like we had before by the Kedem, once Aniyim stop going for it, you can take it. Very good. If there's even any one of these many matanis which allows for the ani to come and take it, he's allowed to come and take it, even though the other types of matnas aniyim are no longer available halachically for him. And even though there's ein l'shikha tachta. In other words, one is not related to the other. If there's any one of the many matanis available for the aniyim, he has the right to go and to get it. Matnas aniyim shabasadem that are there, but it's so insignificant, or it's a product that's so to begin with inexpensive, and the amount that normally is left behind is something that no one cares about. That's called she'ein ani makpidim aleim. It's like any monetary thing. If people like are miyayish or they don't care, there's hefker, meaning it belongs back to the balasadim. Because this type they don't care about. Halacha yudal. Kol matnas aniyim elu. Ein noyhagois min ha'toira ela be'eretz Yisrael. Like trumas u'maisres that midoy raisa are only noigen eretz Yisrael. Why? Because the Torah says ubekutzlechem es ketzir artzechem, your land. Or as it says, yours means the Holy Land. We find a Spanish with Talmud that peya loyheges bechutz la'aretz midivrayim. Now the Gemara only uses peya. The Rambam is saying the Gemara doesn't only mean that only peya. That only peya is something that we have to leave midrabanan everywhere. Everything that we mentioned here. Shahem kulam loyheges bechutz la'aretz midivrei soifrim. The final halacha of this chapter, halacha tezvav kamu shira peya. Oh, what's the minimum? So there was no minimum amount, which means you can leave one shiboilus, one grain stalk, from a humongous field. You'll be yoitz. But midrabanan ein pachas echad b'shishim. It has to be at least a 60th. And we don't say that since peya b'chutz la'aretz is only midrabanan, so b'chutz la'aretz we leave the biblical ein lahem shir minimum shir. We don't do that. This midrabanan of at least one of 60th is bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz la'aretz. It doesn't mean that you should only leave a 60th. Actually, you should add u'moisev al ha'echad mishishim, depending on the size of the field, how many aniyim, and how much were you blessed. For example, sada shiktana b'yos, a very small field. If you're only going to leave a 60th of a very, it's almost counterintuitive logic. In other words, if it's a very small field, 1/60th is nothing. So then the Chachamim want you to add. They didn't give a formula, but add to the 60th. Or also, if there's many aniyim, add to the 60th. Doesn't say how much, but you add to it. The im zonama'ata also, if you planted a little bit, and God blessed you so much that from a little came a lot. So you know that this is an extraordinary bracha. It's always that way. When we see that, add according to the bracha. And the Rambam says, you're going to get more reward. There is no upper limit. To be continued.